So I'm Ashley Swartz, CEO and founder of Furious Minds. Welcome. I'm very fortunate to be here with a former colleague and one of the smartest men that I know in media, Jordan Bitterman.
Nice.
Congratulations on your new job.
Thank you.
Jordan is the Chief Strategy Officer at Mindshare now. So, you know, the topic of conversation is defining the value of video, right? And there's kind of two sides of that coin. There's the qualitative, the quantitative, right? And we sort of as digital natives often retrench to measurability. But there's a much larger canvas, you know, to sort of approach. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the difference between the two and what the starting point is.
Yeah. We should retreat to quantitative because that's the only way we're actually going to get to a point where we know whether it works or it doesn't work or where our effectiveness is. But it's a good place to start as qualitative because you know, we basically plan in the area of what are we trying to achieve. And so as it relates to digital video, you know, video is emotive, and we've known that since the beginning of television. We've known the power of an emotion of video. But what's interesting is that television-based video is probably our most quickest cume, emotional channel. But digital video has the emotion, but it also has the ability to be transactional at the same time. And there's a power to that in that, when I say it's transactional at the same time, obviously you have the ability to move from seeing something, being impressed by it or being moved by it, to take action within a click in the same session as a simultaneous thing. Now, obviously with mobile devices in people's laps, if you're seeing a television commercial and you want to move, you can, but there is a second movement that has to happen on a different device and it has to be, you know, very measured. So I think for starters, even though we're a very agnostic shop at Mindshare, obviously television's important, digital video is important, the idea that it's both emotive and transactional at the same time is really important. The second thing I'd say on the qualitative side is the targetability of digital video. What we don't really have at this moment in television is addressability at scale, right? We buy based on content. There's a number of different ways in which we can do that. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's actually gotten very good over the decades. But the idea that we can layer in additional pieces of data around behavioral and interest, et cetera, when it comes to video online or in mobile, but just digital video in general, you know, makes it much more targetable.
So when we talk about addressability,
yep.
I mean, it's still, you know, high six figures, seven figures to create a good 30-second spot for a, you know, Fortune 200 brand, right? Or a top 200 interbrand brand. Can we take advantage of addressability if we don't differentiate creative for different audiences and, you know, we don't sort of optimize formats and things like that? I mean, are we really ready for addressability?
Well, we don't have to create 6 and 7 figure spots, high 6, low 7 figure spots for digital video. There's a lot of ways. You know, you and I have had conversations over time about what's premium video, and obviously most television spots from Fortune 200 advertisers anyway are premium video spots. Normally we have that conversation around the content itself. You know, in the digital space, we're not always expecting as consumers, as audiences, to see that same type of spot. There are shorter spots, there are different ways of shooting them, et cetera. So we can get more addressable in terms of splitting our creative to make sure that we've got, instead of 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of creative, 10 or 20 or 30 pieces of creative. There are technologies, obviously, that allow us to do that, to go way, way beyond that, to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 pieces of creative. And that's really where our world is taking us. It doesn't mean that the premium video spot in television doesn't have its place. It absolutely has its place. It's the most potent thing we've got. But we have this other tool in our arsenal now that we should be considering, and technology is enabling that.
And so when you talk about the transaction and sort of, you know, video becoming a call to action in lieu of a passive sort of, you know, brand experience, and then we talk about Fortune 200 brands actually being storytellers, right? I mean, how important or less important is adjacency, right? How important is the quality of the content? Because I'm not going to use the word premium because that has many different contexts, but just the quality of the storytelling beside which you're aligning your brand. How important is that today? in your decision making?
Depending on your objectives, depending on the marketer, it's still very important, but it doesn't have to be everything. So you obviously want to make sure that a certain portion of your objectives, or one of the objectives that you have amongst a number of them, are going to be satisfied by the right adjacency, the right content, because that whole idea about intersecting the right person at the right place at the right time, that place is important. That's the context in which they're seeing it, and that context can be content. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be everything. So for instance, you could take 100% of your budget and you can make sure that 40% of it or 50% of it is in premium inventory, while the other 50% or 60% is maybe not in premium inventory, but certainly it's audited, so it's the right inventory. It has to be proper for the brand, safe for the brand. But potentially at that point, the scale and the ability to reach people based on behavioral and interest graph data could be more important than the context. And that might be had at a cheaper price to be able to get you a larger reach to achieve your objectives.
So how are you, and I'm going to ask sort of everyone on the panel this, how do you define premium at a moment in time right now?
Defining premium, well, again, this is one of those depends questions, which we all kind of hate in these settings, but it really does depend. There's one marketer that may look at premium content and say, it's got to be shot by a famous director, it's got to have celebrity talent in it, it's got to be running on a first rate, in their estimation, whatever that is, a first rate distributor. And there's other situations, other content that they may deem non-premium. Another marketer may say, that's fine. Yes, it's on YouTube. Yes, it's made by a studio that, only 5% of the public and 10% of the ad community has ever even heard of before, but it meets the criteria of what my brand is all about, and that could still be premium. So unfortunately, it's a depends answer, but it really does. It just varies.
And where does, so let's go full circle and where we started, which was measurability, right? So it's interesting because the data's all over the place, right? Like if you qualify premium and you look at adjacency as a cornerstone in your investment strategy for video, doesn't necessarily result in going back to the transactional side of it, of your pre-roll or mid-roll performing best, right? So how do you reconcile that if you look at it from an investment perspective?
Well, if it goes back to objectives, you might have a campaign where part of that campaign's objectives is awareness, and part of it might be driving engagement, which I know is another term that means different things to different people, but or driving consideration. You may look at various tactics in the same plan to be able to help deliver that. So if the objective is awareness, then you might want to be associated with the best adjacencies you can imagine for that brand, because it's the company you keep in that sense. Whereas with other parts of the campaign, you may say, look, let's get more transactional around this. Let's get a little bit more down funnel. So let's use the interest graph as opposed to the contextual adjacency to drive that. Yeah, no doubt there have been instances where the best context does not necessarily drive the best results when it comes to ROI more down funnel. But there are plenty of studies that have shown that digital video advertising drives up funnel metrics, brand recall, awareness receptibility, or receptivity, I guess would be the word, better than television does, for example, and probably would do so better than sort of more run of web video.
So if you had to hang your hat on the most meaningful, and again, all the questions I'm sort of posing are at a moment in time, right? Because we're at such a sort of nascent stage of online video. If you had to hang your hat on the most meaningful KPI for a brand, sort of CMO for video, what would it be? Is it rating points? Is it?
Yeah, you know what? It is. I'm happy you said moment in time, because it is a moment in time, and I think at this moment, even though it wouldn't be necessarily, if I was the chief marketing officer, what I would say is the most important metric. I think the most important metric for us right now is efficient delivery of message. to the right audience and those front end metrics that we find from it. Because I think, if you ask a lot of CMOs why they're not moving more dollars from television to digital video, they'll say because television works for them. It just works for them. They know that if they spend a certain number of GRPs per week or per month on television, they're going to move Y number of cases of product. Their sales figures say that, but in many cases they don't have direct correlation to those sales numbers.
Right.
And so basically at some point in time it always comes back to the upper funnel metrics. So I think in order to incentivize those dollars that are held by the CMO to move from television to digital video, you've got to compete at least in that space in the upfront for a while to be able to prove that the channel at the very minimum does not reduce your ability to drive that awareness. And then you can layer on the fact that yes, you also have this, going back full circle to the beginning of our discussion, you also have this ability to drive transaction. You can get closer to the customer. And there's other metrics that you can layer on top of that to show value that you wouldn't necessarily be able to show in traditional television.